Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to welcome you on behalf of the Youth Gaming Association for our first ever webinar, Coaching Essentials Feedback. At YGA, our mission is simple. We're helping schools build strong, student focused esports programs that go beyond the game. We provide free tools and resources for coaches and staff because we believe everyone should have access to what they need to help their players grow. And most importantly, we're teaching players the skills that last: teamwork, mindset, and personal growth. We know that when esports are done right, they can transform a school community. Players become leaders, coaches become mentors, and games become lessons in discipline, communication, and confidence. That's what today is all about, helping you take that next step in your own program. Before we jump in, feel free to use the chat here in the stage to submit any questions as we go. We'll have two Q&A sessions built in today's webinar. The first one will happen about halfway through just to make sure nobody gets lost in the technical details or processes that we'll be covering. That's your chance to stop and clarify anything before we move forward. Then, at the end of the session, we'll have another Q&A focused on bigger picture questions. Things like how to apply what you've learned today in your own teams, schools, or programs. So as ideas or questions come to mind, drop them in the chat at any time and we'll make sure they get covered. Now to guide us through today's session, I'm excited to introduce our speaker. Luke Moore brings experience from every angle. As a coach, he's worked with players from beginners all the way to the collegiate level, coaching T2 and T3 Valorant teams, helping teams stay motivated and connected. As a player, he's competed on teams, reached high ranks, and tested feedback methods firsthand. As a teacher, he's built math and robotics lessons and knows exactly what it takes to bring structure and purpose into a classroom. He understands what it means to coach gamers, not just to win, but to grow. Please join me in welcoming Luke Moore to the stage.
Good, thank you. Today, we're going to be discussing creating and providing feedback to players. Feedback is what people think of most when they hear the word coach. Your job as a coach and the feedback you give can be broken down into four main categories in gaming. First is the mechanics. These are what most people think about when they think about being good at the game. It means pressing buttons quickly or accurately at a good timing, things like this. The second category is game sense. This is talking about the understanding of the game. What decisions you make during the game, are the decisions good? Are they bad? And can you analyze what's happening in the game? The third category is communication, especially in a team setting. When we talk about how players may talk to each other, how they may talk to a coach, or coach may talk to them. Any form of communication in that regard is something you may be coaching. And the last category I want to talk about is mentality. Mentality refers to the attitude of the players, how their mindset is when they approach improving, where they get feedback and how they implement that feedback and the goals they set for themselves. We will use examples from the bottom three categories, but our main focus is going to be talking about that mentality and coaching and giving feedback in a way that promotes a better growth mindset, helps players develop clear goals, and helps them work on their attitude, and using examples from the bottom three categories. As we go through our slide, we're going to be going through an example practice session using Valorant, but I will keep the concept as general as possible so the ideas can be applied to all games. We're going to start with preparation. So what you as a coach are going to do before practice and what you're going to do with the players as you get into practice before the actual game starts. We're going to work into live notes, which is just going to discuss how you as a coach are creating your feedback or synthesizing that feedback as the players are playing while they're in the game. Since your time is so limited, you need to be able to be working on that while they're actually playing. And we're going to talk about refining, which means taking those notes and those ideas and all that feedback that you may have generated from during the game and turning it into something cohesive that the players can easily and you can take in, adjust to, and apply to their game. We're going to talk about VOD reviews, which is one way of actually giving that feedback back. It means going over a video of your players playing the game with them in a like in a setting where you're all together as a group discussing a specific round. So you may have a talk about a 5 minute clip and say, "Oh, I liked this, I didn't like that," and it's a very collaborative effort, and it's very beneficial for player growth. Then we're going to wrap up with reflection, just like you would wrap up at a practice with reflection. Players are going to get a lot of different ideas and a lot of different feedback from different sources, whether that be you, themselves, or their teammates. And reflection is a great way for them to think about how they are going to apply that into their own game, what modifications need to be made, and what they're going to do in next practice, and really kind of building that final piece of the puzzle. Starting with preparation, this is talking about what we're doing before practice starts as a coach, and what you're going to be doing the very first thing as your players walk into practice for that day. In order to have effective preparation, we're going to need three main categories. And we're looking for the energy of the players and the team environment to be very positive. Usually, when we're talking about playing video games that players are interested in, the energy is already pretty high because people are going to be excited to play games, but we want to be able to direct that energy into a good area. For example, if a player has a clip of something they did really good and they want to show to the other friends and say, "Oh, look at this clip I did, right? Was did some amazing thing." As a coach, you should try and reframe that into saying, "Hey, I noticed you did a lot better with this particular thing than in that clip." Or in this clip, I noticed this was really good. I like how you improved there. And so I'm reframing their energy into an excitement for not just playing the game, but for getting better at the game. Next, we're going to look to set clear goals. We're going to talk about how to have these goals both be and feel like they're player driven. So your player has some investment in the goals that are set, that they set and that you set for them. And we're going to make sure our goals are clearly defined so that players are getting feedback and thinking about the game in specific areas for those goals. And lastly, we want to set clear expectations for the players. This means both the attitude of the players, the team culture. So are people, being very angry with what's happening? Are we able to recenter that frustration into a positive area? If we like maybe a part in the game goes bad, that shouldn't be taken out anger and mad at each other. That should be an opportunity to learn and grow. And we want to really have that team culture, have that whole environment be very positive thinking and like working forward to a better solution. We're also going to be setting expectations of being accountable. So that means that if a player has a goal of improving their game sense or improving a certain way they move, for example, then throughout the practice, you as a coach should be holding them accountable to working on that goal they talked about. It's all too common where teams will have a practice session where they discuss, "Oh, I want to work on having moving better today," and then the practice will happen and all that goes out the window. So you should really try and hold your players on your team accountable to the goals they've set to themselves for themselves. Now, this is a cutout from the Esport guidebook. Specifically, it's in the week 3 of the Valorant section. And as a coach, before practice starts, I would go to this week 3 section and look for some ideas for what I want to do for my practice. Reading through week 3, in this example, is talking about aim and shooting. We're talking in particular about the fundamental skills that in gun control, and that's a fundamental skill. It's all I'm talking about using every round of Valorant. So I want to really build good fundamentals here. The week also includes some key focus areas to work on. So in this case, tapping versus bursting versus spraying. These are all different ways that a player can shoot their gun in Valorant. There's also other details we can look at, maybe flicking or micro adjusting, and these are all explained in that week. Then I've got a clear goal to work on. In this week three's case, the goal is really about them being independent learners. So they should be able to identify when they're doing good, when they're doing bad, what gunfight styles they're working on, or what gunfight styles they're using or not using, when they should do things, and should know some drills they can improve themselves so they can be independent learners. That's my end goal. Now, when I go to select a topic for my focus on that practice, let's say, for example, I want to use a crosshair placement. I'm going to think about this as a coach, and then when I go into practice with the players, I'm going to say, "Hey, today we're going to work on crosshair placement." I'm going to give them a brief explanation of what that means, maybe a few demonstrations about it. Um, There's some drills that you can run that are available on YGA that are examples, but if not, you can make your own drills and have them do that as a group so they all understand the concept they're going into. And they will have a clear expectation of what that goal is for that practice. And I'm working my way to my final goal for that week. Great. Now, as practice starts, we recommend that you use a sheet like this. This is a from the Valorant Week 1 packet, and it's about a reflection sheet. So players will get a sheet like this to start of practice, and they're going to start filling it out, starting with just their name, and they're going to write some focuses they're playing for that day. They're going to work on that day. So, for example, a player might come in and think, "Hey, I really want to work on my movement or my, how I play together with my teammates or my, calm aim." These are some things they may have seen either from their friends, maybe you told them, maybe they just thought of themselves they want to work on. That's really where their personal inspiration and where their own drive is taking them. I'm also going to tell my players, or you should tell your players, to have a team focus. And this is going to be what everyone in that group is focusing on. Since we picked crosshair placement in the previous example, I'm going to say, oh, the topic for today is crosshair placement, and I'll have them all write that crosshair placement goal. That gives them both some individual driven goals and some team driven things that are more so everyone's on the same page. Now, breaking this down, how this really helps, we've kind of set clear goals for them to use. I've defined those at the very start of practice, so they should know what they're expected to do. I have preset areas that are always going to be the same. So every week they're expected to, work on their personal communication, their personal performance in the game, and then their energy levels is also something that's set every week. So at the start or every practice, start of every practice, they're going to talk about. They should see that and know they're going to talk about their energy, the atmosphere, the team communication, and that whole energy around the practice. As a sneak peek into the reflection section, at the end of the practice, they're going to go through and fill in more details about this. So for the start, we're just filling in the goals, and at the end of the practice, they're going to fill in how they did and talk a little bit about that. So I'm setting them up for that reflection later, and that way, throughout practice, they're going to be focusing on that thing, and they'll have that sort of wind down reflection area at the end of it. Right. The next section to talk about is live notes. So this is referring to when the players are playing their game, whatever it is, you as a coach need to be able to both create feedback while the game is happening, which is a challenge, to watch and write and, think all at the same time, and also give players feedback during that. So we're talking about how to do that easily and how to do that effectively. Some key concepts for that, for making those live notes, is that we want to make sure they are fast. Since the games you are coaching are most likely going to be fast paced, we want to make sure that when you write down some notes, we can do that in a quick way so we don't miss something that happens a little bit later. And it's not taking your attention too much away from the actual game that's later. So we're talking about how to make it concise, how to make that feedback instant. In some cases, you'll have the option of giving players feedback right in that moment. So, for example, in Valorant, there are rounds that the game is split up into. So if I see something really important, or you notice a player is maybe forgetting to work on the crosshair placement they should be working on as a goal, you can tell that player, hey, make sure you're working on your crosshair placement as a sort of mid-practice quick reminder to get them refocused. I'm also going to try and have my notes be focused. So that means you are going to keep your notes always, at most times, relevant to the ideas that you've set up for your players. In the previous example, we talked about the players working on their crosshair placement and their team coordination, which means all your notes should refer to those main goals you started with. It might be the case that you see some mistake that doesn't apply to one of the goals you set before, and that can be worth writing down, but that shouldn't be the main priority. And most of your notes should be focused on the original goals that you've set. And lastly, we're going to make sure that our notes are always referring to examples. That way the players can notice what times you're actually talking about and can see that thing for themselves. While they're playing their game, they're almost in a different world, and it's very hard for them to see a third person perspective of their own game, So by setting clear examples in the notes themselves, we allow it to make it really easy for you to go back with the player and say, hey, look at this situation now that you're not playing. See what I see or see this kind of thing. And with those examples, I can really easily do that and help them see themselves, do bad or do good or make this play however they want to make it. All right. So as we go into examples for live notes, this is another example of a from the Esport Guidebook. It's week 8. We're looking about how I would take notes on a certain week. So this week talks about micro plans and callouts, and some key components of this are it's all about how the teams work with each other. I'm noticing that these are about making actionable plans with nearby teammates during real-time situations. So the way I'm going to take notes for a situation like this is I'm going to be looking for players to be nearby to each other and making real-time decisions. I'm not going to have my notes be as focused on what is the best option in every moment. That's going to be very hard to do, very time consuming. I'm going to be more focused on saying what is the where are those moments happening? Are decisions being made rather than are they right or are they wrong? Great. Now this is an example breakdown of the notes. So I'm going to talk about how this would actually work. One way I would do it is I'm writing down some identifiers, which means in Valorant case, it's broken down into 24 rounds. And so at the start of each round, I'll write down a note that says what round it is. That way I can easily find where my notes are referring to. I'm going to write down some description of what happens in that round, just so I can serve as a reminder to myself, oh, that's the round where this happened, that's the round where this happened. I'm going to write down some key discussion points. This is where the actual feedback is going to be coming in and the kind of things I want my players to take away from that round, the moments that may happen in. And if I have extra time, I can add in some details that kind of give more information about the moment that I'm trying to bring their attention to. Now let's talk about how this helps build that for live note taking. We're really looking to be fast. So that means in this case, your notes should be very brief. Right, you're only saying that the Omen should fight mid, like very quick sentence. I'm not giving too many details there. I'm just saying important pieces. I'm saying character names, character saying locations. KJ and Viper are also character names, as well as location being garage. So I'm making I'm taking the key points to make it really easy for myself to write it down and get it out quickly. All right, again, I'm looking for my notes to be focused. In this case, we talked about playing together and making those plays together. So all my notes, or most of my notes, should refer to them being together, right? In this case, pretty much most of them talk about being together. In this case, these both examples all talk about being together. The examples talk about being together. This example kind of talks about being together and getting the same plan. So all my notes are trying to refer to that main focused point. And lastly, I want to have good examples. So one way of making these examples are I'm marking every round or everything I want to bring up with a plus for a good thing that I want to talk about. Oh, this is a good job you guys did. Maybe I would for a bad job or something they didn't do as great. I'd mark it with a minus so I can quickly do that and find it later. And then finally, I'm writing a timestamps throughout all of these examples. Your game may not have a way to do timestamps as easily. It may be that you do lap number in Mario Kart or some other system to keep notes, but something that allows you to find where that example happened in a VOD is super useful for both you and the players as finding examples for later. So now we're going to talk about a little bit more about Valorant in specific. I'm going to give you the background you need to understand the examples we'll talk about in a little bit. This is the minimap, so it's a top-down view of the game, and we're only going to worry about the top-down view. These circles right here in teal, these are teammates, so those are your players on the team. And these circles in red are signifying enemies that your players are fighting against. Yep. In this case, we're looking for them to be working together, and that really means they are, at the very least, standing near each other so they can make plans with each other. So looking at this round, I see that my 3 players here, this one being Omen, Sova, and Viper respectively, are all standing near each other. I can even tell they're looking the same direction, which tells me that they are working together in some extent. It may be that we go back as a group and they actually weren't working together and they were all over the place, but they just happened to be standing near each other. But this is just a signifier that I'm going to use to to mark down points where I think that coordination is happening versus not happening. Here's another example. Some other moments I want to mark down are moments where they're not working together, where they're very separated. In this example, I can see that the two teammates at the top is Viper and the bottom is Sova. They're very far away from each other. So since they're so far away from each other, they're not able to make those team plays that I talked about at the start of practice. And so I'd mark this down as a bad example as a potential thing to review and give them feedback on. All right, we're going to go through a example of a round and look at how you might write those notes throughout the round. As the round starts up, the first thing you should probably do is start to write some time signature for that round. In this case, I wrote round 12 because that's the round they're talking about, and I wrote something about this round. In this case, I wrote that Omen, Sova, and Neon, which are these three on the left right here, they're all grouped up, and they're fighting C long, which is this area of the map. So I've wrote something that marks what round we're down, what area we're talking about, as well as something about that round so I can find it better later. Now, as I play the round out, I'm going to be looking for those players being grouped as well as separated for good and bad examples. One thing I see on the left there is I saw my players walking down together and then they walked back together over here. And personally, I thought that was a great example of them working well together. And so I would write a plus, I would write a timestamp. In this case, 2544 is about round where that happened. I'm saying they did a good job, and I'm going to say something about what I thought was a good job. So in this case, everyone backed out at the same time. They seemed very together. In this case, you might have had a bit of extra time to write some more details. So I wrote out that I love that they went to garage together, which is just part of the map. So the fact that they had a separate goal right after also seemed like a good thing for me, and that's why I wrote about it in a little bit of details with the extra time I had. Now we continue with the round, and I'm probably writing these out as this part of the round is going. I'm adding the details in, writing the timestamp, all those things, and I'm watching the minimap to see if anything else happens that I want to discuss or I want to note down. Okay, one thing that I noticed, you may notice different things, but that's okay too, is that on the right side here, our Killjoy, which is this character, has gone out in front of the other teammate. So they're very split up here. And ultimately that causes them to be killed without any help, right? They're in a fight right now. And that's a kind of moment where I want to say, oh, that's an area where they should work together. Again, I don't know exactly right now what the best play for them is to do between the ones I wrote down or talked about earlier, but I know something should happen here. And that means that we should probably talk about it as a team. So I'm going to write down a minus to show it's a bad thing. I'm putting a timestamp so I can find it later. I'm saying something about what happened. In this case, they're doing a retake, and so I said that was a thing that wasn't together. And I'm writing some details about that with the extra time I have. And as the round goes on, I'll be writing out those notes while it's happening, keeping it brief, and adding details if I have the extra time to do so. Okay. Now I would go on the next round, start with round 13, proceed, keep writing more notes, so on and so on. If you go through all of that, you're going to end up with quite a lot of notes and a lot of great feedback to give to your players. The problem is that the players are going to get overwhelmed with all that feedback and it's not very focused. So we're going to look to refine those notes into a more manageable state where the players can really absorb the information you're trying to tell them and latch onto the important bits without being lost in too many different examples or too many kind of one-off topics and things like that. So as we refine our notes, we're looking for three key concepts. I'm looking to make my notes be grouped, which means I'm having them all different notes that talk about the same type of thing should all be together. If half my notes talk about crosshair placement and half my notes talk about playing together, then I should make two groups for those. One group about crosshair placement, and one's about playing together. And each of those groups contain the specific examples that I brought up in my notes. I'm looking to be formatted which just means that I have a clean format that I can both read for myself. So when I want to bring up examples in a team setting, I can do that easily, as well as when the players want to look back at their notes and say, "Oh, what were you talking about when you mentioned this thing?" They can look at the example for themselves. And lastly, I'm looking to add some extra details in this area as well. So now I'm going to take all those moments where I just said this was good or that was a bad thing, and I'll start to expand on why that was good, why that was bad, in an easy to now that I have extra time, I can do that in a more legible format when I have more time to think and discuss my ideas with the players a little bit more. So this is a cutout of some notes you may have after you watch your players play, and is how we're going to group them up and format them into something more usable. So I'm looking to make two categories in this case. The categories that I created were quickly getting on the same page and timing our fights together. And so what that means, I'm going to take a example note. In this case, this 953 example, I thought pertained to getting quickly on the same page. So I'm going to toss that under that category, that group of ideas. Or for this example at 1257, I thought this idea pertained to timing their fights together, so I'm going to toss that in the group of timing their fights together. As I go through these notes, there are going to be some examples that don't fall into any of the groups, and although it is a little bit frustrating to have feedback that you want to give, it's recommended that you don't actually give that and you try and stay focused on your main ideas to give to the players and maybe think about that one-off thing that happened as a thing to work on next practice or a thing for the future. But for now, I'm keeping all my ideas just in these main groups and trying to keep steady with those. Now I'm going to take those groups' ideas and add some details to them, so they're more legible and the players can understand them on their own, as well as you can understand them if you go to do like a VOD review or some other feedback method. First thing to do is to expand on what it means to be on the same page. So I'm going to take that title of my group and write a little bit about it so the player who reads these notes would understand what I'm talking about. In this case, the thing that I noticed was that when they are in chaotic situations, they are a lot worse at getting on the same page, but when they're in calm situations, they're a lot better at it. So I want to really focus on getting on the same page really quickly so we're able to do it in even chaotic situations. So bring some background up for that. And now I'm going to expand on each example. So where I had an example before that may just say, oh, this was a bit strange, I'm going to expand on that and talk about maybe how I could make it better, what some examples for them to do are, and things they could apply to their own game. So in this case, I said their setup was strange, and then now I've expanded it to give them some ideas of how they could play it in a different round. If a player reads this now, they don't just see, oh, it's strange, what does that mean? They can say, oh, I should have done one of these three things, and so they can make the changes they need to make and adapt their understanding of the game and their gameplay for it. Sometimes you're going to have examples that you don't know the perfect answer to, and you just saw something happen and you don't know what's right. That's totally okay. And for those ones, I would write something along the lines of need to review this as a group. And that's a great opportunity to grab those players as a group setting and say, hey, what do you guys think is a good idea here? And have that be a feedback mechanism, have that be a collaborative effort. Let's look at a positive example. I'm going to talk about what I liked about that example in specific. So before I might just say, oh, this was really good. Now I'm going to start talking about some details where I say, what about it was good? In this case, I like the play they chose was a very good play. So that's game sense. And the communication happening in that play was very quick and clean. So I talked about the communication aspect of it. So I'm giving kind of clear examples of what I actually liked about that play rather than just saying it was good, adding some more details. Now, as I add a bad example, I'm going to be talking about what areas I want them to focus on. In this case, what it applies and how it applies to the game. So my note originally says that their Sova was staying on site. They need to rotate faster. So I've applied some like what the changes. And other details I want to give them is why that's important, so they can understand and apply it to future rounds. It also gives me some notes that I can talk about if I were to do a VOD review. I know what I want to bring up, discuss, all that good stuff. Now, as we go into a VOD review, we're going to talk about what that is for a bit and why it's important. A VOD review is just a way of giving feedback to players in a group setting There's lots of ways to give feedback. A VOD review is just one of them, and it's where you take a video of them playing a game and look at it together. So um, YGA has VOD reviews built into the curriculum as a great example of being able to give ideas to players, and this is because it is a very powerful feedback mechanism. If you are only giving your players notes that just say, "Oh, this should be better, this should be worse," there's no feedback coming back to you that tells you if your players actually understand what you're writing to them, or if they even read what they're writing to them. In a VOD review format, I can get that back and forth, which means I can ask players questions live, and I can say, "What should you do here? What do you like about this round? What did you not like about this round?" And that tells me as a coach where I should direct my attention. Do they understand this concept? Do they not understand this concept? And so forth. With just a one-directional notes, that doesn't exist. So that's why VOD review can be really, really important. A VOD review usually works as a group. Usually the full team gathers together with the coach. You will have a video of a recent game or games they played ready to watch together. You'll have a page, much like the one we made earlier, that consists of examples of things to talk about, maybe timestamps ideally of these areas I want to talk about, maybe some notes to discuss what thing you want to mention in each of these timestamps. When you go to do that VOD review, you should have maybe 2 to 3 topics that you want to talk about. In our case, that was working together, maybe it would be crosshair placement, but there should be some kind of clear goal for that VOD review. So it's not just a group of, criticism, it's a very focused directional effort of this is the thing I want to discuss together. And I'm really looking for that VOD review to be player centric, which means the players should be giving you feedback. You should be getting input from the players, asking them questions, and so on. There's 3 main things that make a VOD review successful. The first thing is it is focused. Like I said before, your VOD review should be focused on only 2 to 3 groups at the most. Sometimes you won't even get to all those groups. You might only get to 2 or maybe even just 1 group. But all that concepts and ideas and time should be spent on just those specific things. And ideally, those should be split up that time as well. So you may do 30 minutes on one topic, 30 minutes on another topic. And I'm really trying to have all your feedback be focused on one area so the players don't get lost in random details. You'll notice that your players may want to talk about other things. For example, a round that you bring up as an example of good crosshair placement, they might say, "Oh, I did really good here. That was amazing." Well, I would push you to redirect them and say, "Why did you do this round? Why did you do so amazing this round? Was your crosshair placement good? Is that what led you to get so many kills, or was it something else?" I'm trying to keep them recentered on the topic that I want to bring up and I want to be discussing. I'm looking to have players be an active participant in the VOD review. That means you should be asking them questions throughout it. That means that when you are giving feedback, most of the feedback, if possible, can be the players telling themselves. For example, if we talked about crosshair placement at the start of practice, and then we go to the VOD review at the end of practice, hopefully you can sit there and do the VOD review and just ask, was this crosshair placement good? Was their crosshair placement bad? What could have been better? And the players themselves will be able to give feedback and say, oh, I like this crosshair placement at that moment. I don't like the crosshair placement at that moment. So again, it's being very player driven. But as a coach, you're facilitating it, you're locating them in the right area. We're trying to just keep the players as the main actor in that area, in that situation. Another important part of a VOD review is it should be flexible. When you go into a VOD review, you may have notes of examples and things you want to discuss, but the way it goes can be vastly different than how you originally planned it in your head. It may be that the first thing you talk about, the players fully understand it in 5 minutes. And that's okay. That's why you have extra examples and extra topics to talk about when that happens. And you should go to the other examples and go to the other things you want to talk about rather than spend time talking about something that they already understand. It also might be that players spend the whole hour trying to understand the first topic that you thought would only take 10 minutes. And that's okay too. As long as the players are actively participating, working on one of the topics that you think they should learn about and participating in that learning environment, that's great. And you want to facilitate that by being as flexible as you can. So I'd recommend bring extra examples as well as extra topics that you might have to talk about if it goes too fast. So you're ready for that. So we're going to go into an example VOD review this time. Um, on the screen, we're going to watch back uh, that game and some examples from the game we saw earlier. And this would be the setting as having players in your group as your team watching the VOD together and kind of what that would look like. Going into the VOD review before I even play any rounds, I would usually ask the players, "Hey, we're going to talk about quickly get on the same page and crosshair placement today." And I'm going to ask them, "What do you guys want to work on first?" Right off the bat, I'm starting off with that player investment and player driven. That way, it feels that the players are the ones deciding what they should do. And honestly, that's what's happening. So I'm getting the players invested in the VOD review from the very onset. And so in this case, we'll say they picked quickly get on the same page. So I'm going to give them the brief overview I'm going to talk about. I'm going to say overall, I thought you guys did really good on this area. There were some moments where I think panic was being set in, where in chaotic situations it gets all over the place. We're gonna look at those and talk about how to get them better. But I saw a lot of improvements from last practice, maybe. And I want to bring up some examples. I want everyone to look at the this round and tell me what you guys think. And so I'm going to bring up an example I've wrote in my notes. In this case, at 3 minutes and 3 seconds, we're going to talk about that strange site setup, and I'm going to talk about this with the players. Instead of just saying this is what I want you guys to do, I'm going to say something along the lines of I want you guys to look at this round and tell me what do you like, what do you not like about what the Neon and Omen did. I'm directing their attention to keep them focused. I'm going to say make sure you guys look at how they work together. And I'll play the round out for them so they can watch. Maybe they'll build their own ideas. You can have them write their ideas down on a piece of paper if that helps. And seeing the round, I'll pause it and I'll say, hey, what do you guys think? Did they do good stuff there? What did they do bad there? Did they work together? Did they not? And I'm collecting that player input on ideas. They might say something that you agree with, like, I think their setup could have been more focused in a certain direction. And then you as a coach maybe push them to give examples. I would say something along the lines of, what are some options for they could do? Could they go aggressive? Like, what would that look like? Where should they go aggressive? Could they back off? What would that look like? Push the players to give more, understand the game more. They might say something you disagree with, and that's perfectly okay as well. Maybe they thought that Neon and Omen did a great job, and it should be your job to ask them why. What about did they do that was a great job? Did they communicate well? Did they do this well? It may be that you have your mind changed in the middle of VOD review. That's perfect. The players are participating, they have their own opinions, and that means they're watching and learning. All right, let's go to a positive example, or one that I thought you might say. I thought this was a great example that you guys did at 4:30. We have our C long push. Can you guys tell me what you think you did great in this situation? Maybe some things you would want to improve on, and I'll play the round out for them. And I'm gonna ask them, okay, what do you guys like about this round? I thought it was pretty good. What about it was really good? Why did this round work out for you and other rounds didn't? I'm pushing them to try and reflect, try and understand a little bit better the topics we're talking about. In this case, playing together. Hopefully they would say something along the lines of, "Oh, I thought we communicated this really well. I thought we chose some good options with our play." Whatever it is, I'm giving them feedback on that. I'm pushing them to give more details, and I'm trying to nudge them in the right direction. When I go for a bad example, I'm going to mark the same round. Let's do the 30:05 one, the very bottom there. So looking at this example, again, having the timestamps marked out for me, as well as if it's a good or bad example with the minus or plus, makes it really easy to do the spot review. I can just go to an example really quick. And I'm looking at a bad example. I might say, okay, players, I want you to look at this round and tell me what you think. Was there good stuff here? Was there bad stuff here? How can we do better? I'm going to direct their attention. I'm going to say, look at the Omen, who's this guy, the Neon, who's this guy, and the Sova. I want you guys to look at them and see, do you like what they did? What could they have done better? And I'll play the round out. Once I've kind of watched it through, I'll ask them for feedback. Did you guys like what they did? What about it did you like? I might ask. I might give my own opinions a little bit. I might say, oh, I like how this happened. I like how the Sova did this thing. But maybe why was the Omen over here? If they really didn't like it, well, what happened there? Why were they not together? Was there no communication? Were they not on the same page? What's the underlying cause of that? I'm always trying to kind of push them to understand a little bit more. as I go through these examples, I'm trying to judge their feedback and their understanding of the topics. So once I feel like I can give them an example and they understand the concept going into it and they understand what they should be doing differently, what they did do well, and all those things, I'll move to the next topic. In this case, I'd move to cross replacement, right? And I'm really trying to gauge understanding, gauge where they're at, involving all the players. If it means I have to call on a specific player to ask their input, then that's what I'll do. I'm trying to engage everybody and get their own understandings. Great. Now the players will have lots of different feedback. They might have written feedback from the form of notes. They might have a VOD review, like oral feedback in the form of a VOD review, where they've heard lots of ideas. They might have feedback from their different teammates who told them, "Hey, I like what you did there. I didn't like what you did there." And they might have feedback from themselves, where they're judging their own gameplay. Lots of different things, kind of like spinning around in their head. And reflection is a way to take those ideas and consolidate it down into actions and future changes. To have a good reflection, we're looking for three main things. We want to be player driven. So while feedback was very coach and outside focused, reflection is very inside focused. So the player is the one doing the reflecting of themselves. It has to be something that you can help them with and guide them through, but ultimately it does need to be that they are the ones doing it and they're the ones understanding what they need to change and making those changes themselves. Should be honest. So if a player did something very good, they should be honest with that, and maybe look to build on that in the future. See why'd you do so good in that area, maybe not another different area. If they did really bad in a certain area, maybe have them try and understand why it was bad. Were they not paying attention? Were they distracted with something else? Were they, something, well, other, a million other things. But they should try and drill down, understand why this bad thing happened, and maybe in a future practice they can make that change. But if they just leave it as, oh, I didn't do this thing, and they don't actually reflect onto why that happened, then that's just going to happen next practice, or it might happen in the future without any real change. That's why reflection is so important. And finally, I'm going to kind of build on the sharing. So while players are reflecting, it's a very hard activity to do. I'm going to have players an opportunity to share with each other and help each other out in that regard. So at the end of reflection, I'm going to have them share their ideas, maybe their whatever they come out with in their reflection, and have them share that with the class. Maybe some other players have some ideas. Since all the players are playing the same game and they're all in that same environment, usually they're able to help each other out to some degree. Because what one player did bad this practice, usually someone else on your team has done bad in the past and worked past it. So I'm really trying to encourage that team bonding, that team help, and that we're all, supporting each other. One way we can kind of promote that reflection is with a sheet like this. So going back to that same sheet that I had, they should have the players fill out the start of practice. At the end of practice, you'll have them fill out the details of it. In this case, they should fill out how they did in each category. This player said they did a 7 out of 10 in crosshair placement, and then they wrote where they liked the crosshair placement, why, when they do it good, when they do it bad. They had a 5 out of 10 in column aim. Well, why was that good? Why was that bad? When was it good? Try and push your players to be drill a little bit deeper into the whys that things happen. Don't let them just leave it at, oh, this was good, this was bad. Their cross replacement was good, they said. They talked about some specifics of where it was good, and that's great to do. And they wrote some examples on things they maybe want to talk about or things they liked during the practice. Breaking down why this really helps, we have it being player driven. As a coach, you should tell them to expand on their ideas and say why it was a 5, why it was a 7, but they're the ones who need to write it. You can give them maybe ideas, but it does need to be them the ones who actually make the decisions and make the things, oh, this is why my crawling was bad. This is why my cross replacement was really good. I'm looking to be make my players be very honest. So they should be saying that if they do something good, they should be able to say it's good. That means from a coach perspective, when they do bad at something or when they don't perform in a certain area, you shouldn't look to say, oh, don't make this mistake ever again. Work with the players and say, this is a great opportunity to learn, right? If everyone goes to practice and they all do amazing at everything, then there's a lot less learning happening. So try and show those ideas of maybe failures being an opportunity to grow. And I'm looking to share as well. So by writing some examples of some bigger picture things, maybe an example of something like they like to do, maybe something that they want to do in future practices. I'm giving them things to branch out on and to share with the team and work with each other in the future. So this is all going to be a great opportunity for them to discuss with you, with their players, build that team cohesion, maybe even give you some ideas as a coach of what you want to talk about next practice. The players might all have an idea that, 3 out of your 5 players all talk about communication being a problem. And so that might be something to look at in your next practice. And that might be where you take your ideas. And again, that's building team cohesion, builds player driven energies where they feel like if they talk about not having good communication, and the next practice you say, "Hey, I heard you guys that your communication was bad, so I want to talk about communication in this practice." Now they feel like they're invested in the team and they feel like they're the part and their feedback is being heard. So it's a great opportunity for that. Um, all right.
Big shout out and thank you to Luke Moore for leading today's YGA webinar and sharing so many valuable insights. We really appreciate the time, energy, and passion you brought to helping coaches grow stronger programs and better players. And that will conclude the webinar. On behalf of everyone here at YGA, I'd like to thank you for being part of our first ever webinar. The fact that you're here says a lot about the kind of coach and mentor you are. We hope that you learned something valuable about how to give your players better feedback within this session, as we discussed how to prepare students to actively look for mistakes, help keep them accountable within game sessions, how to take live notes and refine them, how to use those notes within a FOD review, and how to reflect upon those notes both as a team and as individuals. We hope that you utilize YGA resources to help you make the most of your gaming sessions in the future, as YGA is here to help you grow skilled gamers and stronger people within your esports program. Before you go, don't forget to grab your free copy of the YGA Coach's Handbook and use code SKYX for 15% off all purchases at yga.info. You can always find more free tools and upcoming sessions right here on our Discord or at yga.info. Thank you for joining us.